I want to thank my patron supporters who are helping me to make more videos more often. If you'd like to become a patron supporter, please go to patreon.com/TJR, the original. Thank you for watching this video. Hey everybody, this is TJR. 2020 has certainly not been a year without its challenges. But through it all, we did get quite a bit of good music. And so with that, I would like to share my top 10 albums for 2020. Now, throughout the year, I reviewed a good majority of the albums on this list on this channel. So I will leave a link to a playlist for those videos in case you'd like to see them. In previous years, I have never ranked my top 10 numerically. This year will be the same, with one exception, as the last album I discuss will be the album that I rate above all others. With so much new music being released every year, I am sure that there will be many albums you've heard that I haven't, and vice versa. So I invite you to post your top albums of 2020 in the comments and share them with everyone.
A strong reason gets the best of me.
Okay, let's get to it. In no particular order, I'm going to start with Predita by the Stone Temple Pilots. This melancholy musical reflection on the themes of loss and regret took me by surprise. Its laid-back vibe caught a lot of fans off guard, and I have to admit that I was one of them at first. But on repeated listens, I found the album's understated beauty continued to grow on me. After posting my review, I put the album away for several months. When I returned to it, I found myself surprised again by its simple and sometimes dreamlike charm. And this return was one of those rare occurrences where I found the album to be even better than I remembered it. Next is For Their Love by Other Lives. Prior to For Their Love, my only other experience with this Oklahoma indie group was their 2009 self-titled album. And my reaction then was nowhere near as strong as it continues to be for their latest album released in January 2020. I honestly don't feel I have heard enough of this group's studio recordings to describe them as a band, but in my initial review, I described the album For Their Love as Bruce Springsteen and Morrissey have a child who listens to a lot of late 60s and early 70s Italian motion picture scores, and a lot of folk music from the same period as well. Now, in December 2020, I would also add Johnny Cash and the 80s new romantic sound into the mix too. Darkly cinematic and mysteriously beautiful, Other Lives is an album of sometimes dreamlike audio texture, and track for track, it features near perfect musical arrangements. But the band never forgets that all those excellent audio textures mean nothing without great songwriting, and great songwriting is at the core of For Their Love. Next is Trouble and Strife by Joan Osborne. Ever since watching her in the film Standing in the Shadows of Motown, a movie that revealed to the world that she was secretly a soul singer, I have hoped that Joan Osborne would make a soul album, and finally she has. Now, to be fair, Joan Osborne did record an album of soul covers, and I did enjoy it. But what I have truly been waiting to hear from her since Standing in the Shadows of Motown is an album of soul originals. With Trouble and Strife, I finally get to hear it. And I have to say it was worth the wait, and I wasn't disappointed. Trouble and Strife is an album that touches on all levels of the genre, from gospel to blues to down and dirty nasty funk. Trouble and Strife is an album I have been waiting for over 10 years to hear from Joan Osborne. It's a huge heap and bowl of what's good for your soul, and it's the album I always knew she could make.
Celebration spread worldwide the day the politicians died.
Next is Quickies by the Magnetic Fields. The 12th album by the Magnetic Fields is a collection of 28 songs ranging from 17 seconds to 2 minutes and 35 seconds. Featuring satirical lyrics and song titles like The Day the Politicians Died and The Biggest Hits in History, it would be easy to dismiss this album as a collection of novelties. But I refuse to do this. In my opinion, there is a real art to writing songs that are this short and yet still convey something musically memorable. Yes, there were some songs on this album that I wish could have explored more extended musical arrangements, but Quickies proves that size isn't everything. Yes, this is a Quickie review. What were you expecting?
Take from me what you can hold.
Up next is Pick Me Up Off the Floor by Norah Jones. Norah Jones is an example of an artist who continues to grow as a musician, vocalist, and songwriter. Over the years, she has been described as pop, as blues, and as jazz. When I first listened to her debut release, I described her as a cross-pollination of Americana and jazz. But with each album, she has been pushing the various musical elements that have defined her sound for decades into new directions, continually exploring and redefining what a Norah Jones album can sound like, and all the while managing to stay consistent with her musical roots. And with her latest album, she does this again. She does this quietly and unassumingly and without fanfare. She continually challenges herself musically, and the result is that she keeps getting better and better. She may not be loud and in your face like a lot of other popular music artists are, but tread softly around her. She's carrying a much bigger musical stick than you might realize.
Lead her way to the field below, to have a look around, girls, to have a look around.
Next is World on the Ground by Sarah Jaros. With its lyrical themes of confronting the past and musical arrangements and melodies that are often haunting and beautiful simultaneously, World on the Ground by Sarah Jaros is the musical equivalent of comfort food. In a better world, this album would exist as a benchmark for the term modern country to aspire to. And if it were any other year, I would call it the perfect album for a rainy day. But in 2020, every day was a bit of a rainy day to one degree or another. So I would describe World on the Ground as a relaxing break, and a ray of sunshine from a year that everyone wants to put behind them. But I will keep this album for those hopefully better years ahead. Thank you very much. Next is Resonate by Lettuce. I didn't get a chance to talk about the latest release from this ultra-progressive jazz funk band from Boston, Massachusetts during 2020, and I think I made a big mistake. So I am delighted to be including their latest in my top albums of 2020. Resonate is a collection of 11 instrumental tracks that feels like some of the best 70s soul and groove you've ever heard sans vocals. And this is my first exposure to the band. Think James Brown, think Steely Dan, and think everything in between that's spacey and groovy, and you have an album that continually makes me want to pick up my axe and jam along. By the way, I did lie a little bit. 2 tracks do feature a guest vocalist, and one of them, Remember the Children, does make me wish they might try more songs with lyrics. But Resonate is still one of my best and most exciting discoveries of 2020.
I disagree with the way you are failing to pleasure me.
Up next is I Disagree by Poppy. This genre-bending album from Mariah Rose Piera, better known as Poppy, melted my brain when I first heard it at the beginning of 2020. And now, at the end of 2020, it's still melting my brain. At first listen, I suspected the album's psychotic blend of speed metal, sugary modern pop, sugary 60s pop, and icy cold electrona, combined with occasional moments of progressive rock, oftentimes within the same song, would get old really quick. But it doesn't. This album is anything but a one-trick pony. I Disagree is dark and disturbing. And if CDs sound colder than vinyl, then I will opt to get this album on CD in order to experience its crazy musical nightmares in all their cold digital glory.
In the
isolation scene. She's the queen of the quarantine.
Next is World as a Waiting Room by White Denim. In all this talk about albums created during quarantine, I wish that World as a Waiting Room by White Denim got mentioned more. In my initial review back in May, I declared this heavy, bouncy, fun, pop rock album as a musical cure for the doldrums of quarantine, and as a sonic party going on in your head, where everyone is invited. World as a Waiting Room can make some small comparisons to David Bowie and 80s rock, but if there is only one artist from the classic rock era I would compare them to, it would be the Tubes, who are best known for writing slightly off-kilter but still fun and catchy rock tunes with sardonic and satirical lyrics. White Denim definitely follows along this musical vein, but with a more pumped up and at times more punk attitude. Also, just like the Tubes, this band displays excellent musical chops, capable of inspiring jealousy in less talented musicians. Even after 2020 is over, World as a Waiting Room is a party that I will be in no hurry to leave.
That's the bolt cutters. I've been in here too long.
This brings me to the last album on my list, and the one that I will rate above all the others. I'm talking about Fetch the Bolt Cutters by Fiona Apple. This album was released in April 2020, and 8 months later, I'm still wrapping my brain around it. Fiona Apple's music has appealed to me ever since her debut in 1996. I would never describe her music, which danced from the sultry to the quirky, with scattered doses of darkness, as being commercially accessible. And yet for me, there has always been a certain accessibility to the music of Fiona Apple. So it was a bit difficult at first listening to Fetch the Bolt Cutters, an album that felt like it was deliberately trying its best to be as musically inaccessible as possible. Not to mention, impossible to categorize by genre. But by recording this album, she ended up creating one of the most unconventional and challenging albums of her career and 2020. Every time I hear Fetch the Bolt Cutters, I listen to it in a slightly different way. It's almost as if the album keeps reinventing itself each time I hear it. Lyrically, the album deals a lot with the pains and trauma of youth, how those pains can rule your adult life, and how you can free yourself from them. Fetch the Bolt Cutters may not be the most instantly pleasing album I've ever listened to, but it's the most challenging, exciting, and musically mind-bending album I have heard in some time. And for this reason, it makes the top of my list for 2020. Those are my top 10 albums for 2020. Please share yours. As always, if you like what I do, be sure to click a like, click subscribe, and smash that bell notification icon. I want to thank everybody so much for watching, and I hope you all stay safe and healthy. Bye-bye.